The sirens screeched in my ears, joining the rushed pumping of blood through my veins that was pounding a bass line. Together they merged into an incoherent symphony, an orchestra that was desperately trying to attract my attention, with no thought given to harmony. The addition of numerous shouting voices did little to ease my panic. Neither did the fact that there was a not insignificant chance that we were all going to die. It was shocking how quickly procedure fell apart in a crisis, even when everyone was doing their best to follow it. A sizable chunk of Harmonia Orbital Station had become compromised when the space debris had struck the station hard enough to rotate it. Now, despite all our combined intellect and experience, we were floundering. It probably didn't do us any favors that the chain of command had been thoroughly torn apart when several of us had died during the initial incident. As an engineer, part of my job was fixing problems like this, but it had quickly become apparent that there was no fixing Harmonia. Our options were to escape or perish. We chose escape, and therein laid the problem. With so much of Harmonia now inaccessible, too many people were crammed into narrow hallways, all shouting or screaming, a cacophony of voices accompanied by the shrieking alarms as some tried to establish order and others gave in to blind panic. I had started as the former, but quickly devolved into the latter. I think most of us did. I struggled through a sea of squirming bodies, trying to make it to the escape vessels. There were supposed to be enough to ferry every crew member down to Mars in an emergency. Yet even with many of us dead, it didn't feel like this was the case within the mass of frenzied and fearful people. With every step, I felt the crush of bodies around me tightening. It was less like I was moving of my own will and more like I was being roughly shunted along by the tide. I saw people fall. I heard the sound of human bodies being trampled under the surging wave of other space station denizens. I didn't see any of them get up. As the crowd constricted around me, the heat rising to a fever pitch to match those ever-present sirens, everything went dark. There was only the pressure of the people being pressed into me, the heat of the crunch, and the unbelievable noise. Whoever said nobody could hear screaming in space was a liar. I woke up, the screaming and shrieking of alarm systems gone. The heat of the pulsing crowd was entirely absent. It was quiet except for the sound of Wilson's labored breathing through his oxygen mask. It was cold, the life support systems in the pod designed for keeping things survivable, not comfortable. Compared to the compressed mass of flesh I had been a part of in Harmonia's hallway, the pod felt vast and empty despite its far smaller size. Wilson was already unconscious and hooked up to the breathing apparatus when I came to. I'm not sure if he did it himself or if I did it for him. It had to have been one of us. Nobody else was in the pod. Unfortunately, after I blacked out on Harmonia, I don't remember anything until waking up. I'd ask Wilson, but he's not exactly in any shape to give me answers, or to give me his real name. I'm calling him Wilson because I'm pretty sure his name started with a W, and he's my silent conversation partner. Talking to him is about as effective as talking to a volleyball. That was why I started these logs. In theory, someone on Mars, or even someone on Earth or one of the lunar bases, might at least notice these and respond. I don't hold much hope of having an actual human conversation anytime soon, though. I haven't been able to reach any of the other pods. I'm also not drifting back down to Mars's surface like I'm supposed to be. None of us had considered it at the time, but the rotation of the station meant that none of the escape vessels were pointing at Mars anymore. As it turns out, the initial force of detachment, while pointed away, was just enough to make sure we didn't get caught by Mars's gravity. Truth be told, I have no idea where I'm heading right now. I just know that I don't have the food or oxygen to still be alive when I get to wherever that is. I actually envy Wilson. He's got no idea what an unpleasant few weeks are ahead. I disconnected Wilson's oxygen. He's as good as dead anyway. Now that spare oxygen can feed back into the pod's own pumps. I'm probably as good as dead too, really. But this way there's a slim chance that some sort of rescue mission might be able to do something for me. I suppose this technically makes me a murderer. Is it weird how little that bothers me? I don't feel any different about it than I do about the idea of a doctor pulling the plug on a stranger with no chance. I wonder what that says about me. Or about humanity. I remember how quickly all our procedures fell apart on Harmonia. I guess it doesn't take that long for our morals to go out the window in favor of practicality either. We're all just animals in the end. Sorry, Wilson. I guess I just value my life more than yours. I kind of wish I felt worse about that. I probably should have thought ahead with this Wilson situation. I don't have any way to dispose of him. Now it's just me and this corpse floating through space. He'll decompose slowly, at least. There's not much in the way of bacteria or microbes in the pod. I'll probably be dead long before he gets really gross. It's more the unnerving nature of it. It was weirdly easier to accept my looming death when I wasn't looking at Wilson's dead body. He just looks so empty and wrong. This sucks, to put it lightly. I wish Wilson were more talkative. He just sits there silently, staring at nothing. He doesn't even laugh at my jokes. Hasn't so much as cracked a smile. Obviously, I know he's dead. He can't laugh, smile, or hold a conversation. That hasn't really stopped me talking to him, though. A part of me is a little afraid that I might go crazy and start actually thinking he's really there. I'm starting to wish I hadn't gone with a Castaway reference for his placeholder name. There aren't any windows. There aren't any clocks. It's just endless, dimly lit steel, the dull hum of the life support, and Wilson's dead stare. I have no idea how long it has been. I have no idea how far I am from Mars. I've given up trying to reach the other pods. If any of them made it, they seem to be struggling to communicate too. For all I know, there's another colleague only a few meters away, floating in the same direction as me with their own Wilson. Maybe it's Stefan or Carrie or one of my other friends. It's oddly comforting to think of it. It makes it seem like I'm less alone out here. But it's just me and good old dead Wilson, really. I spend a lot of time sleeping. It's gotten surprisingly easy to fall asleep. I think that means the oxygen is starting to thin now. The mechanical hum in the pod sounds different, like it's struggling, chugging along on fumes. They aren't really meant to be able to sustain us for more than a week or so. I'd use the rations to judge how long it's been more accurately, but since it's just me and Wilson, they're going by just fine. They taste like cardboard and dirt, though. It's not even worth gouging myself on a going away forever dinner. I woke up cuddling with Wilson earlier. I don't even know what to say about that. Holy shit. I realized belatedly that with only me here, the oxygen is going to go for a lot longer than intended. It could easily last 15 weeks or more. Can't this just be over already? I don't even know what to add to these stupid logs anymore. I'm just talking to hear something. It's not meant to be possible to open these doors in space once they've sealed. I'm an engineer, though. Surely I can fix that. Fixing that is proving harder than you might expect, and Wilson is no fucking help. I'm so tired. Seriously, enough is enough. Shut up, Wilson. Nobody asked you. Okay, that last one was a joke. I know the dead guy can't talk to me. I really wish he could, though. I don't recommend screaming in here. The echo is very unpleasant. My waking and sleeping hours are starting to blur together. This might finally be over soon. I wonder what the aliens who crack open this can will think of me and Wilson all snuggled up and dead when we eventually crash into some rock a few thousand years from now. There's a low oxygen warning light. What is the point of that besides making people freak out? Well, it's a sign of relief for me. I wonder how long that stupid thing has been flickering without me noticing. Say good night to Wilson, everybody.
Hello, and welcome to Stories Across Borders. Here we discuss stories told across a range of different mediums, books, movies, games, you name it. The only rule is that we can only discuss things in terms of the writing. Anything like acting, animation, or mechanics is out unless it relates directly to how the story is being told. I am Daniel Radford, author, aerospace engineer, and also your host. And I'm joined once more today by my frequent co-host John Kernan as we bring our cycle on adaptations, remakes, and reimaginings to a close.
Hi, I am not a fan of volleyballs. They don't make good friends.
John was, of course, also the voice you just heard reading Departure, the story I wrote for this cycle. And You might be asking at this point, especially if you're new to the show, hold on, isn't this a cycle on remakes? Why did you write something new? To which I say, I kind of did, but also no. Departure is a reimagining of a story I wrote all the way back in season one when we did our genre blending cycle called Smiling into the Dark, which we'll get into in a moment. Cue the music break. Right. So, for those of you who don't remember, Smiling into the Dark was a dramedy short I wrote back when we did that other cycle. It follows astronauts Faraji and Paul as they drift through space in an escape pod after an accident on their space station causes the whole like operation to fall apart in catastrophe. Over time, they gradually get to know each other and find comfort in each other as death inevitably approaches. Obviously, Departure follows the same basic concept, two people kind of drifting through space after an accident. Although, obviously, I executed it a little differently this time.
Yeah, we never even found out what Wilson's name was.
I mean, it's Paul, actually. Yeah, you don't find that in the story. So, to be blunt, I was not very happy with Smiling into the Dark to begin with. I don't think either the comedic or the dramatic elements came through very strongly. The pacing felt off. The character dynamics felt really forced. We didn't spend enough time with the characters to show their relationship changing and growing and becoming something like organic. So I think it was already kind of the ideal candidate for this cycle.
Yeah, it definitely gets the idea across, and also not only is it an adaptation, but it kind of has adaptation in it with him recording his story down even as it's being written.
Yeah, I mean, it's even more of a reimagining than anything, and that is actually one of the reasons I did it so differently this time, because I could have theoretically just rewritten the exact same story, but tried to tighten up the things in the writing I didn't like and just execute it better. But we haven't really explored a reimagining yet overly much compared to adaptations and remakes, and reimaginings are a part of the cycle as well. So I decided to take a different approach and address the things I didn't like about how I did the first one in a different way by just changing or removing them.
It works.
Yeah, because I think that is a valid reason to do a remake or a reimagining of a story, especially if you are the original creator, is to go, there are things about this that I didn't think were executed well the first time, and I want to do it again. And we talked a little bit about that last time where we did Spice and Wolf. The first adaptation was a solid adaptation. It was good. There was nothing inherently wrong with it. But they went back and redid it the second time over, and they looked at the first one and went, there are things we could do better. And they did that. And I kind of felt similarly about how I was approaching this in a way.
Sorry, I tried not to wander off into space.
There's also a motorcycle in the background, so your awkward silence was well timed.
I started thinking about how I would like to reimagine The Last of Us 2 to handle spoiler alert, Joel's death a little better.
Well, maybe the show, I haven't seen season two of the show, but maybe the show will.
That'd be nice, yeah, because like I like the idea of what that game is going for, and I am not against Joel's death from a writing perspective, even though it makes me sad. I just think they could have framed it a little differently and made Abby look less like a freak in the process, so that the audience could get into her a little better when it's time to play as her.
Yeah. I mean, similar situation here with this, really, isn't it? There were think there was a lot about Smiling into the Dark that I liked conceptually in theory. But, it's the only one of these stories that I've never published onto my site or onto YouTube outside of the episode it appears in. And ultimately, that's because I think it felt very forced. It wasn't executed in a way that highlighted the things I wanted to highlight well because, and we can be honest with here, I think I wrote that one because I needed to write something for the episode. I wasn't feeling particularly inspired beyond, it's a neat concept. Even if I may have tried to convince myself otherwise, it was done because something had to be done and I didn't do the concept justice. So coming back to it, I wanted to look at the things that I didn't do very well. The pacing, the sense of isolation and fear, a character or characters that were relatable to the audience, Faraji and Paul felt a little too blasé in the face of it all. So I thought, maybe the problem here was maybe the blend wasn't right, I didn't mix the recipe correctly for the effect I really would have wanted. So I did keep the humor in there a little bit, but I dialed it right back to focus more on the dramatic, dark, sad side of the story because I'm not really a comedic writer by nature. I do like to sprinkle some humor into my stories because I think a little bit of levity makes the dark stuff hit harder. So I wrote this one in a way that's closer to my strengths, I think.
Yeah, it came out well. Very a little bit humorous, but in a diegetic way. That's also because the character's trying to have a certain amount of his own humor and distract himself from the horror of his incomplete and not gonna go anywhere existence he's got left.
Yeah, I mean, because that's the thing. Like when you write humor, there's humor that's diegetic and it's inside the story and it feels real. And then there's humor that's kind of winking at the audience and it feels a little clunky and forced. And I feel like Smiling in the Dark, despite it being a conversation between two people, felt more of the second category. Like you could tell it was jokes written for the audience, even though it was two people talking to each other, compared to this one where Faraji, who is nameless, as it turns out in in this version, is talking almost to the audience, and it felt like the jokes that were included felt more diegetic. They were a coping mechanism for him to deal with his isolation, as opposed to two guys who were in doing that in theory, but what really just felt like a badly written casual conversation.
Yeah, I can definitely see feeling that way about the first one. I liked it a lot, but it is still very much just a couple guys talking.
I think if I went back and I rewrote it, doing it the same way, keeping them both alive, keeping them having their casual conversations or whatever, I think I could do it that way better in theory. I definitely don't think it's impossible to have done the story that way back, like, and have it be good. But for the purposes of leaning into my strengths a bit more, of giving a bit of spotlight to the idea of a reimagining as well. I think I am happy with the choices I made. And that's not to say that I think that this is my best work either. I do think Departure could also be better than it is, but I do feel happier with it compared to Smiling into the Dark.
Yeah, I mean, what are you gonna do? A short story written in a short time's almost never gonna be perfect. We've got authors who are famous for writing a lot of short stories all the time that still come up with plenty that have easily viewable flaws. I think this one turned out quite well though, and one of my favorite lines is entry oh 06. I just really like the whole like, hey, you know what? Maybe I should have thought this through. It was actually kind of easier not to feel freaky about dying when I wasn't looking at a corpse. This sucks.
I'm not gonna lie, I love this version of Faraji compared to the version of him in Smiling in the Dark. He feels like so much more like a real person, even though he does something arguably kind of fucked up by killing Paul early to preserve his own oxygen longer. Just that idea of having the that moment of, okay, you're gonna die anyway. If I just turn off your oxygen, I might live long enough to maybe get rescued, and then immediately regretting it, like, ah, crap. This is really
Yeah.
uncomfortable now. I genuinely wish I hadn't done that. And it's not even like a moral issue is the thing. Like he accepts that Paul, who he knows as Wilson, was going to die. It was inevitable. He still thinks really his own death is inevitable. It's not like, oh, I've killed someone and then rescue came. It's, oh, it's a lot harder to, ignore my own imminent death when I'm staring at it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the only thing he feels a little guilty about is the fact that he doesn't feel more guilty, which is almost like a little bit of guilt and more being like, man, what's wrong with me?
It's weird. Like I think he's a worse person in a lot of ways, this version of the character, but he feels more real because of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of funny that a bunch of scientists who have probably already worked so hard to be all about the logic and everything and detach themselves from their emotions and everything are so detached. And then when this guy becomes literally detached with nothing to hold on to, he immediately falls into a little bit of the same thing, only to be like, huh, that didn't help.
Yeah, compared to the first one, I really like how fallible everything feels. Like I can't remember. I don't think the first one ever really explains what happened to the space station they were on or anything like that. I don't think there's really much element of human error involved. And even in this one, yeah, the original incident is they get hit by debris, but it's the little things that sell it for me as far as how big a clusterfuck the operation ended up being. The fact that they didn't account for the impact rotating the space station so their escape pods are no longer pointing at Mars.
Yeah, if they had been more in control and organized during the escape, which they probably really had time to do if someone had been in control, it probably could have gone. I'm not going to say fine, but like mostly survivors and not too many problems.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you talk about control because that's literally the biggest problem with the escape pods is that their whole design is okay, there's a bit of initial propulsion, but then the idea is they're going to get caught by Mars's gravity and just pulled in naturally. Other than that, you can't steer them or propel them. And if they had built that in, this situation would not have happened.
Yeah, if I remember right, I think those types of escape pods are often referred to as either lifeboats or life rafts. Because they basically serve the same purpose that those do on a big ship, except for the fact that nobody can stick their arms out to row.
Yeah, basically the idea is that they're there to get you down to Mars safely and to keep you alive in the pod long enough for like one of their ground bases to come and collect you, which is great if you're pointed the right direction.
Yeah,
But it's things like that. It's things like everyone, all these professional people who've been had drill after drill after drill to deal with this situation, and because their chain of command broke down, so did the procedure. Early on, Faraji mentions even it's amazing how quickly procedure just goes out the window when the people whose job it is to direct things are no longer there. It's like having an orchestra without a conductor. All these incredibly skilled, gifted people who have worked forever to hone their craft But if there's no one directing the timing, everyone's going to be going at a different time. It's a mess.
Yeah. Yeah, it all falls apart just because a couple people who would have been the ones keeping order died first.
It's little things like that, I think, that really make me feel better about Departure. We've talked a lot, I think, about how I mean, I know we've talked a lot about how characters are more important than plots. In particular, I think it's that human element being injected into an otherwise, you know, very sci-fi kind of story. And we talked about this a lot during the sci-fi cycle last season as well. The idea that it's the human element that really shines in sci-fi when it's done well. And I think that weirdly, despite being what the focus was supposed to be, is what kind of fell through in Smiling into the Dark.
Yeah, it was a little bit missing there.
I don't know if it was because of the dialogue or because the balance between humor and drama wasn't right, but it felt robotic.
Yeah, I think that's a valid way to think about it. This one is a little bit more personal despite the lack of a conversation like the first one had.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of funny when you think about it that I made this one feel more human by removing 50% of the human from the story.
Yeah. I mean, hey, he's there.
Kind of.
He's he's there. His presence is felt, especially
In
especially by
criticism.
Faraji.
I'm gonna be real with you. The Castaway reference, I am entirely too proud of that. When I wrote calling him Wilson the first time, I couldn't see my reflection anywhere, but I'm confident I was grinning like an idiot.
Hell yeah.
And I'm not an expressive person.
Listen, that's what wordplay and fun references are all about. If you made anybody smile, it was a success, including if it was you.
Maybe. Maybe so.
But I liked it too because in a way he really was serving the same purpose, except for the part where Faraji was a little more committed to no, I'm lonely, but I'm not gonna start treating the corpse like it's alive. I may think about it sometimes or hear an imagined word here or there, but I'm not gonna give in. I'm just gonna tell him to shut up because he can't talk.
Yeah, it's almost kind of sad, right? Because I feel like if he had been less resistant to that, he might have had an easier time of things going out.
Yeah, it may be a little bit harder to watch somebody losing their grasp on reality in that way, but if you're gonna die anyways, I think it would definitely make your death easier.
But that's one of the things, right? Is like I said earlier on, I wanted to change the recipe a bit, change the quantities of comedy and drama to align more with my strengths but also to highlight the things that I wanted to highlight in the original story that kind of didn't come through. And one of those and this is kind of similar to another story we did last season as well. The one, what was it called? Like Blackest Blue or something like that. I've written so many of these stories now, I lose track of some of them. It's the one with the guy in the submarine.
Yeah, I can't remember I have a hard time remembering the titles too after reading through so many.
Yeah, 4 seasons, well, 3 seasons, and now a fourth we're making now of them. Yeah,
Yeah.
and you only get the ones I do for the show. Like there are other stories and poems and shit that I have done as well. It all melts together after a while. How the hell does Stephen King remember anything?
Probably because he's so obsessed with Maine.
To be fair, by his own admission, there are definitely a lot of stories he has forgotten, but I think that was more because of the drugs.
You gotta have when you're writing that much, you gotta have something to fuel it. Stephen King is still the source of what I think was one of Family Guy's few like actually really good jokes. Because they have the little scene where Stephen King's in the mountains on a road, just like in Misery, and he gets hit by a car
That's not
while
Stephen
he's
King as Dean Koontz. It's the whole joke.
No, but the other joke there too is that Stephen King he gets hit by the car and he's sent flying through the air and he goes like, "Oh man, this is a great idea for a story." Scribbles and then by the time he does a little flip and lands on his feet, he holds it up and goes, "Done."
Oh, I'm thinking of a different joke. Fair enough, fair enough. But yeah, God, that was one a hell of a tangent. It's the same. It's a similar concept, right? Is the vibe's a bit different, but one of the things that I wish had come through more in Smiling into the Dark was the fact that these guys are so isolated and alone. And because it was two guys just having a conversation, that did not come through at all in the first one.
No, because they were almost robotically committed to just keeping the conversation going so that they didn't have to experience any of that.
Yeah, and like in theory, you could have done that and it would have come through that that was why they were doing that. But I kind of dropped the ball there. So for the reimagining, I kind of went, fuck that. I'm going to kill one of them and just make the other guy really, truly alone. And I do think Departure sells the idea of the loneliness, the isolation, and the inevitability of death a lot more than the first one did as a result.
I like to think that just when he's closing his eyes after entry 57, he actually does get picked up by aliens. And he's like, oh, come on, you guys were supposed to show up after I was dead.
Or, at least before I murdered this other guy.
Yeah, yeah, no, he's also just like, where were you guys? Why didn't you save Wilson from me? Imagine the crash out he would have if he did get saved because suddenly he would simultaneously feel more justified for pulling the plug, but also probably suddenly not be able to be emotionally detached from it anymore and be like, "Oh God, I killed a man."
You gotta wonder, like, at what point does rescue become the bad end?
Yeah, yeah, because like especially with like the thing of Paul and what happened to him, it still sucks. But especially in a survival situation, doing something like that, it's easy to tell yourself, well, he was dead anyways. I didn't kill him. I just gave myself a little bit more time. But if you got saved, suddenly that's not a valid defense anymore. Suddenly it is just you killed someone.
Yes, no, survivor's guilt is real. And like I don't think anyone would probably prosecute him given the circumstances, to be honest.
But he would.
But yeah, he would feel that for the rest of his life, and it's almost a blessing that he probably died. Granted, he didn't exactly have a pleasant end. Like, you can tell, I think, that he was doing his absolute damnedest not to think about how messed up the situation was.
Yeah, yeah, he really was focusing on inane, unimportant things that don't matter, like the low oxygen light.
I wrote that one and was like, that would 100% happen to me. Like, that is the sort of inane thing that even in a crisis would irk me. And that is probably why that ended up in there, because it is one of those sort of things where you would sort of go, what is the point?
I guess the only real point is to give you slightly more time in case you haven't been preserving your oxygen enough by being like, hey, you're running low.
Yeah, like realistically, that probably is why you would have that. It would be like, hey guys, I don't know, breathe less, conserve.
Although, come to think of it, I think it is a funny thing though, because specifically in something like an escape pod, a low oxygen light does serve almost no purpose because all you could do is try to breathe less. Whereas, in like a space station, it would serve way more of a purpose because if everything's not coming down and the space station's not destroyed, you see that low oxygen light and be like, oh, something must be wrong in this section. Something there's like a flaw somewhere or a leak or something needs to be fixed.
Yeah, you can like break out the oxygen tanks, maybe do some maintenance on the air recycler, call for a resupply of oxygen. But in the pod, he's helpless. And it's just it's almost like an annoyance, right? He's looking at this going like, are you like, no, you don't say. I'm on the verge of having a conversation with Wilson, who's not, it's not even his name. I don't know who this guy is. He's just a dead guy. I'm talking to him, and I feel myself on the brink of starting to think he's talking back. I'm aware that the oxygen is low.
I also vibe with it because I definitely could not sleep with like a blinking or red, like continuous light. in my face. So as I was drifting off, I would just be like, "Oh, come on, get that out of my face. What's the point? I don't need." Yeah, I know.
Compared to the things in like Smiling into the Dark, right? Where Paul's got his deck of cards. I think it was Paul with the deck of cards, or was it Faraji?
It was one of them.
Yeah, I like that touch, but the way they interacted and things like that, it didn't sell the idea of them being relatable, ordinary people with their own weird quirks and things. I think Faraji in this doing things like focusing on this stupid blinking light and going when did that start flickering? Like how long has that been going that I've not even noticed? Or making stupid pop culture references in a crisis because he references obviously Castaway constantly by calling the body of Paul Wilson. He references Alien at one point.
Yeah, yeah, and looking at it now, I also like the fact I wasn't thinking about it before, but I like that it's only halfway, almost exactly halfway through his entries, just a little bit short of it. That we get like, yeah, you know what? Fuck it. I'm gonna try to open this door, then just followed by it didn't work, followed by oh, I'm tired.
That's
It's just the defeat of like, oh man, I couldn't even end it sooner.
Yeah, I also like the like abandoned joke between entries 34 and 35.
Yeah, yeah, it's just like, okay, that one was a joke. He's not talking to me. Be nice if he was, though.
Also, I'm really lonely, guys.
Oh man.
It's it's almost like The Martian if Mark Watney did not have the strength of spirit to keep going.
Yeah,
To be fair, there's a lot of The Martian here. I think you can tell that I really like that book and movie.
I still need to read it. I haven't even seen the movie, but I want to read it.
I mean, I'm pretty sure the opening line is everything was fucked, and I mean that's a really good opening line. But yeah, I think the more we talk about it as well, the more I'm like, yeah, the biggest problem with the first one wasn't that it wasn't sad enough, it wasn't funny enough. It really was the dynamic between the two characters felt entirely too robotic. They didn't feel real enough compared to this one where despite there only being one living guy, because he's doing this really silly human shit, it feels much more real to me. Like he feels like a much more well-rounded, genuine person. I think as well, changing the format to first-person diary entries helped with that a lot as well, because we're not like an outside looking in anymore. We're in this man's head experiencing the loneliness, that slight sanity slippage, but the inability to actually give in to it and just let it happen.
Yeah, I think it helps characterize him a lot, both just as a person, but also as a scientist, because he already knows what happens to the human brain in isolation. He already knows the dangers of space travel and how the pods work and how low his odds of getting rescued are pointing in the wrong direction. And he knows the things his brain is going to try to do to go crazy in isolation, but that doesn't stop it from happening.
It's almost worse that he knows it's happening.
It is, yeah, because he's aware of it and he can even see it as it happened. It's actually something I deal with a lot when my minor issues here and there pop up is like the logic part of the brain still being active there and still knowing like, oh, this thought doesn't make sense or oh, how did this get to here? But it's still happening anyways, even at the same time as it's being questioned.
Well, yeah, no, I get that actually completely, and honestly, maybe that's where some of this came from now that I think about it. It's weird how when you're writing something, you don't realize where the ideas have come from necessarily, and then you look back at it and you go, yeah, no, that makes sense. Because I think I've talked about this a little bit before, but for the people who don't know, I have pretty nasty chronic health issues. And on top of that, I've also got a generalized anxiety disorder and PTSD of the medical variety. So I can have when when the sickness like really gets bad, I can freak the fuck out. And the annoying thing about it is I'm a logical person by nature, so I know I'm freaking the fuck out and I can't do anything about it. And that honestly adds irritation into the mix.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things like I've had this conversation with so many people where when people turn around to me when I'm like that and they say you're okay, I want to deck them because I'm clearly not.
Be like, no, I know everything around me is fine. I'm not.
I will be fine eventually, but right now I feel extremely ill and I'm having a minor meltdown at best.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. In fact, that's like that part of what you said is my exact words. Whenever someone tells me I'm okay, when I'm freaking out, I'm like, I know I will be.
Yeah, but I'm not right now, and you contradicting that when I logically know that is not the case is not going to make the panic go away. It's just going to make me angry. And I do think that Faraji here is actually in kind of a similar headspace. It's just that he's having the conversation with himself.
Yeah, no, there's just nobody else to point it out. And because he's alone, the logic side of his brain is almost kind of going into overdrive and becoming the voice that's trying to tell him everything is fine when he's sitting here like, well, I'm losing my mind and I'm gonna die, so it's not.
Yeah, he's trying to convince himself that he like his well, it's not he's trying to convince himself that his situation is better than it is. He openly acknowledges that he's screwed, but he is trying to convince himself that he through his sort of very pseudo blase almost persona he's putting on here that he's more okay with it than he is. And at certain points that slips. You know, like you said, when he finally goes, "Fuck this, I'm gonna open the door," and then he can't open the door, and he's just like, I'm so tired."
Yeah, no, like I think the energy he put into trying to open the door was pretty much all he had left.
I just wanted this to be over. I tried opening the door, couldn't open the door. Wilson is clearly no help on account of him being dead. And even before he was dead, he was in a coma, so you know. Shortly followed by the entry, which was don't scream in the like don't scream inside the tin can. Bad idea.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's that's part of what helps too, is you can tell all the crazy stuff is happening. It just so happens that he's only putting in entries. I mean, besides there's a couple gaps that we don't read, but like the entries are only coming in when he is in a sound enough state of mind to make a real entry. So we're never seeing him become a gibbering wreck, but it's not because it's not happening. It's because he's not recording it. He's only mentioning it.
Yeah, you can kind of fill in the dots in your head, like the spaces between the certain entries, and go, okay, he's not had a good time between, well, I mean, through the story entirely, he's had a bad time, but he's had a particularly bad experience going into this, I think, because you could
Yeah,
tell at some point, because he doesn't, I don't think there's an entry in there where he says, I'm going to open the door.
no.
You only get a space between two entries, and he's like, yeah, that didn't work.
Yeah, no, like the yeah, we literally get
Oh, actually, no, I stand corrected. Entry 26, he actually does say, I'm just talking to hear something. It's not meant to be possible to open these doors in space once they've sealed. I'm an engineer, though. Surely I can fix that. And then 27 is like he's obviously tried a bunch of things between 26 and 27 is what it is. Where he just goes, nope.
yeah, but I think it's still it helps to be contextualized by the jump between entry 20 and 26 because we go straight from okay, this is looks like I'm gonna last longer than I thought I could, but couldn't it just be over now straight to all right, that's it. That's it. I'm gonna do it. And then immediately it didn't work. I have nothing left.
It's
What?
yeah, it's another one of those like really silly human things, isn't it? To be like, okay, no, this is going on. Like, I don't really have a concept of time, but this feels like it's been lasting entirely to. Oh, these are meant to be able to hold like. a lot more people, and there is one living person in here consuming the oxygen. Oh, crap.
Which is funny because it almost feels like at that point he's not just not caring, but is almost intentionally not thinking about the fact that he
Made it
pulled
worse
Wilson's
by
plug anymore because at that point he has to face like, oh, I didn't even help myself. I didn't even help myself by doing that. Now I'm here alone, and all I want to do is cut it out early, and I can't.
You touched on something else as well with the entry, with the with the format of this that I did want to talk about as well. Because one of the other things I didn't like about Spiralings of the Dark was the way it was paced. It managed to simultaneously be monotonous, very and entirely too short for what it was trying to portray. So I think by doing the time jumps entry to entry, I fixed that problem a lot. The pacing feels a lot more organic. But also, something I am kind of a little proud of that I did here, I didn't date the entries. They're numbered, but they're not dated.
Yeah, we don't know how long he waited between any of them.
You have no idea how long it went between entries. Like, you can kind of guess that there was a decent amount of time between 20 and 26, for example, like you said, and probably between 27 and 32 even. But you kind of get the vibe that 32, 33, 34, 35, and 36 were all kind of in sequence just to fill in time.
Yeah, like at the very least, all within the same day.
Yeah.
And like, whereas some of these could have been a week or more apart.
The thing is, he doesn't necessarily know either.
Yeah, exactly. Like he's putting him in when he feels like it or when he thinks he has something to say. He lost his ability to have any concept of what time it is a while ago. He might have been able to at least keep track for the first couple days, maybe even the first week or two when he was in there, because you can kind of try to count and be like, it's been about this long. Maybe he has something similar to a watch or something that kind of tells time around, although probably not. But like eventually, not only is your brain going to falter on it, but even those of us who are good at telling time, we do it by having mnemonics around for what time it is and signs and things to look at. He's floating in the middle of space. There is nothing in space that indicates what time it is anywhere. All of the signs of time we know involve you being in one static place where the world is changing around you.
Yeah. We take, I think, our sense of time for granted. Like, the human sense of chronology is not nearly as good as we think it is. Our internal clocks are not as reliable as we think they are. Like, we get set into a routine and we naturally stick to those routines to an extent, yes. But when you take away your ability to see visible, tangible signs of the process progress of time, it becomes way, way harder to judge how long it has been.
Yeah, and the fact that our sense of time like fluctuate, like the way we experience time fluctuates with what our feel for it is and what our brains are experiencing at the time makes us that much more unreliable without something to anchor us.
Yeah, I made a comment literally earlier in the day that 3 minutes on a microwave feels twice as long as it actually is compared to like 3 minutes of a cool song you're enjoying or a video you're watching or something. And
Yeah,
it's
and it's the whole
exactly
thing
the
about like a watched pot never boils too.
yeah, it's exactly the
Like
same
if
premise.
you go do something else for a couple minutes and the thing you're waiting for is almost instantly over, but if you are in fact waiting, it'll stretch out into infinity.
It's exactly the same experience as like when you're a kid in class and you're like doing this really like the driest, most boring classwork you have ever experienced. It's the end of the day, it's the last hour, and you look up at the clock and you're like, okay, I can do this. There's 30 minutes left. And then 20 minutes later, you look up and you've got 29 minutes left.
Yeah. An hour later, maybe you'll have 15 minutes left, and like, what is happening? I've been here all day. I'm gonna freak out.
That's one of the things that makes solitary confinement horrific. And when you do that to a person for long enough, it constitutes torture.
Oh yeah. And if you add any element of monotony in, it even makes it worse, sometimes almost exponentially. That's why one of the actual, like, real forms of torture is just solitary confinement, but they'll have something like a single thing dripping water where you can hear it that is dripping it in the exact same pattern forever.
Yeah. And genuinely, that's one of the things that makes me, because I hate being bored. I hate monotony. So I think about the
Hmm.
situation that Faraji is in, and I'm like, I would rather be Paul/Wilson.
Yeah, I don't know if I would have made it to entry 26 before trying to open the door.
Nothing is the worst thing you could experience in so many ways. And you gotta remember, this guy was on a space station before. You might think, oh, it's probably not that, exciting in theory. It's probably like a lot of very monotonous things. Probably, but he was also probably doing something all of the time that he was
And there
awake.
were a ton of people.
Yeah, there were people to talk to that were alive and could talk back. And even if there was probably a lot of busy work and monotony and routine, realistically speaking, when you're in that scenario, you don't have that much downtime, I imagine. There's probably a lot of running experiments, fixing things that are breaking because he was an engineer. It was his job to keep things running, and also exercise and things to keep your body intact because of the low gravity. He
Yeah.
probably went very abruptly from a life of I'm either asleep or I am doing something to I am stuck in here with a dead guy for a very long time with no stimulation.
Yeah, no, he was alive in his own coffin.
And he couldn't even manage to go crazy.
He couldn't even go crazy good enough. Yeah, no, he had to just experience it all lucidly to the last breath.
I struggle to think, even though I wouldn't call it a horror story in the traditional sense, right? I can't think of of many scenarios that are scarier, that are more horrifying than what Faraji is experiencing in both of these stories, but especially in Departure.
You know, it's funny. It obviously has a completely different vibe here, but of all things, part of it makes me think of a line from Gears of War, actually, in that they have this moment where Cole, the guy who basically used to be a pro football star before the world fell apart, is back in his hometown and he just looks around at it and looks at everybody and says, "You ever feel like you died and nobody told you?"
Yeah, I can kind of see the comparison. Kind of. It's a bit different here, I guess, because the problem is he's very aware that he hasn't.
Yeah, but I just mean like it's also like in a way it already happened. He is as good as dead, but
Yeah,
he's not been allowed to catch up to dying yet,
yeah. That for sure is the like through line.
which in a way fits to me too because if there was literally somebody to here to tell him it would be easier.
I feel like reimaginings can get a lot of flack, right? Because it's one of those, like, especially if you're taking something. Obviously, I took something I wasn't happy with and changed it. But when you take a story that was good already and are like, but what if something different? It's very easy to feel like the story has is falls short, or if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I think that's one of the things that's so fascinating about reimaginings is this idea of how does removing this element change how this plays out? And in Smiling into the Dark, Faraji has a way easier time of it because he can have his crappy robotic joke sessions with Paul. He can play cards with Paul until eventually the oxygen runs out and they both die shortly one after the other, having had someone there who can comfort them compared to and help them process it compared to the version of him in Departure who has been deprived of that. And that makes it a much harder pill to swallow for him and makes it much more painful for us as the audience to watch because we are watching this man who knows he is doomed, but has no outlet for it other than talking to nobody.
Yeah, loneliness is a very insidious killer. Ironically, he would have died faster if he wasn't lonely, but he also would have died much better.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think that's why one of the things about it though is it's very like I look at these two stories and I look at how changing this one thing completely altered the vibe and the of it for the audience and the experience of it for the character. And it makes me go, oh, I'm understanding why fan fiction is such a huge thing, or why what if scenarios and death battles and all this other like fan space of what if scenarios are such big things because it is genuinely kind of interesting to consider like if these two people met that normally wouldn't, how would that play out? Or if this one thing happened differently in the story, how dramatically would that have changed everything else? Because there's a whole space on YouTube which is basically just taking existing fictional media and posing that question and then trying to logically break down how those things would happen if just that one tiny thing was changed. And I've never like thought of it derisively, but outside of, getting a kick out of the goofiness of Death Battle, I've not really gotten into that hypothetical space. It's not been my thing, but I think especially examining it through redoing this reimagining of Smiling in the Dark, through talking about it in this cycle, I've gotten more of an appreciation for why people do it because it's really interesting to take this idea of, how dramatically would everything change if this one tiny thing was tweaked or removed or added?
Yeah.
Because killing one guy changed even if I had written it this like the same way, third person, sort of semi omniscient, even if I had not changed the format of the storytelling at all, killing this one guy still dramatically changes everything about the story because 50% of the people in the story are now dead.
Yep. It changes a lot. Recontextualization, I think definitely, I mean, I think it is the main appeal of like a lot of adaptations, but especially just reimaginings is like how butterfly effect can we really get with anything? How many things could change if just a couple of things did first?
Yeah, and that goes back to something we talked about back in the first episode of the cycle and the end of the season. Reimaginings, I think, are made for the people who were invested in the story to start with. Because whether it's like me looking at the story I wrote before and going, I could do it better. It's There's still a degree of investment there, in I care about this concept and want it to be good and compelling. And it's the same sort of thing for an audience member enjoying a reimagining. Those stories, the what if scenarios, the how does this look from a different perspective, all of that is for people who already have an investment in the original concept. Even if that investment was, man, I would like this so much better if it was told from this other character's perspective, and someone going, well, let's do it then, compared to a remake or an adaptation, which by nature, I think, is intended to bring the story to new people.
It's a good way to bring it to new people, although it is a shame that sometimes, that difference in perception can be the wall that stops people from enjoying reimaginings.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of a you win some, you lose some kind of a situation because there's always going to be some people who have that if it ain't broke, don't fix attitude. But I think they are actually the minority in a fan base. Like, I don't think anyone. I mean, again, I myself, I'm not huge into the idea of looking at a story I love and going, I really want to see this, but different. But I understand the appeal, I think, that because it's the same sphere as all the theory crafting and what if scenarios and things like that. So yeah, I think you are always going to have people who are like, I preferred the original. Like, I didn't think Smiling into the Dark was that good. But there's every chance that there's someone in our audience who's like, what do you mean? I liked it. I got it. I thought the whole point was that they're forcing themselves, and that's why it's robotic. That person could exist. There's always going to be that element to any fan base, but I do think by nature the idea of a reimagining is going to appeal more to the people who were invested in the original concept.
I agree.
I've rambled on about my own stuff and why I'm way happier with this one long enough. We're at about the cutoff point. So, thank you all who were tuned in for this one. If you enjoyed this episode and were listening to it over on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever else it's shown up at this point, it could be anywhere, to be honest. You can also find these episodes on my website, radfordwrites.com. I also share stories and poetry and things like that there. You can follow along with my anthology series epilogue there or buy my books there. Basically, if I'm doing it, you can find it on that site. That also includes, of course, future collaborations with John, who you can also find on YouTube and Twitch streaming as Sephia, where he is very entertaining whilst making jokes that are better than the ones in Smiling into the Dark and
Hmm. Sometimes.
and gaming. Well, he tries. And we did it. That was a good outro. We finally made it on episode 4 of the season. Quick
We
before
did
we
it.
fuck it up. Goodbye.
Bye. See you later.